Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the library. I'm Ben Heckman, library director, and it's great to have some audience here in person and some online. This is our second ever hybrid program where we're doing it online and in person. Special shout out to Paige and Jason for all their hard work pulling all this together. Jason made a few upgrades, so our audio should sound better online compared to last week. So thank you, Jay, for that. The library is honored to partner with the Bexley Minority Parent Alliance, Bexley Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Bexley Pride, the Bexley Special Education PTO to present tonight's candidate forum. Here at the library, we believe strongly that civic engagement is key to a healthy community, and we are happy to serve as a gathering place for neighbors to come together, listen, share, and learn. A quick note about safety tonight. Our in-person audience is masked, and due to spacing, we're going to ask that candidates remain masked throughout the program as well. And with that, I'd like to introduce and turn it over to Brian Drury with the Bexley Minority Parent Alliance, who will introduce our moderators and walk us through tonight's format.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Just want to go over a couple ground rules so everybody's from there. For online individuals, please use the chat function. We will then send the questions over to our moderators to review. If you're here, we'll have runners from there. I see Anna, she's going to run over there, and Jessica, they're waving their hands right now. Ken has been brief regarding the rules, and we will make sure to try to make with respect during the process. This includes no cheering, booing, questions, attacking individuals, or inappropriate comments during the session. Just had to put it out there. Given this current environment, we want to model a positive and welcoming environment in Bexley. Given the personal attacks and threats that have been on other school board members across the city who I've talked with, we want to applaud, encourage you, all 6 of you, for coming out and putting yourself out there. So we want to thank you. Our process will be an introduction of the candidates who will allow 90 seconds to discuss themselves. Then the moderators will ask the questions for the remainder of the event. Just a quick introduction of our moderators. First up is Carol Beckerle, who is a former Bexley resident, whose sons graduated from Bexley High School. She's attorney, school teacher, and currently sits on the Columbus School Board. Our next moderator is Ben from there. So, and I want to thank him at the last minute. As we had a little change in plan, but he volunteered to do that, and I now really owe him. So again, I'm gonna kick this off. Also in the back from there, the Bexley Historical Society from there, which I also sit on from there, so I'm plug. We have books from there with one of our mayors there, and John was giving me kind of a history on him, and so thank you, John. So those books are free. Also, the candidates have gotten them, so they won't have to file reports of getting improper candidate contributions from there. But so with that being said, I'm going to kick it over to Carol to introduce the candidates. And Ben.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my first time doing anything like this, so please afford me a little grace as we continue with the evening. Let's take a chance. I assume Brian will give the candidates a chance to introduce themselves. Okay, and I think what we'll do is we'll start with different people every time. So this time we'll start with Eric. Okay, now let's keep it.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming out. My name's Eric Zanner. If you had Susan in English, you knew me as Mrs. Zanner's husband. If you knew any of my kids, you knew me as Margot's dad or John's dad or Diane's dad. If you knew Susan from school board, I was Susan's husband. We moved here in 1982 when Susan took a job in the English Lit department, teaching, loved it, and have put 3 kids through the Bexley school system. So I know how much fun that is to navigate for you parents that currently have kids in the district. Susan was on the school board for 8 years, 6 years with a term interrupted by breast cancer, then came back and was reappointed. We moved out of Bexley in 2012, in large part so the kids couldn't find us. But after Susan passed in July of 2019, I decided to move back. I missed it. I also was part of the group that started the girls lacrosse program and the boys lacrosse program, and I just missed it. So I'm running because I care. I'm running because, like you, I care about living in Bexley. I am not upset with the coach or anything like that, or the theater department. I just want Bexley schools to be as good as they can possibly be. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you to our hosts tonight, and thank you to our moderators. I'm Joan Pickerel. I'm running for Bexley Board of Education because I want to make sure each and every student has as customizable learning experience as possible to achieve their academic success and to equip them for the future. I have two daughters who are in Maryland Elementary School. They're in the 2nd grade. And as soon as they got into school, I decided I need to take a more hands-on approach to what's going on in our district and learn more about what they're doing every day when they're not with me. So at first, I volunteered for the Bexley levy campaign, which was successful in passing the last operating levy. I volunteered for the English and Language Arts equity audit last year to learn about what students in high school and middle school are reading. But I didn't just stop there. When I decided to run, I decided to have as many conversations as possible with voters, community leaders, teachers, students, administrators, and board members. And I've done that. I've had hundreds of conversations. I've knocked on hundreds of doors. And I've made my platform based on what I heard out in the community. And as a board member, I know how important it is to work and build a consensus to get things done. And I want to make sure as a board member that we are ensuring that our students feel seen, valued, heard, and validated in the classroom. And also that our wonderful teachers have all the resources they need to be successful and be supported as well. And tonight I'll tell you a little bit more of the specifics on how I think we can do this as a district and a community. Thank you.
A little lower than maybe I would put it if I was doing this. Hopefully this picks up. My name is Patrick King. I am the proud parent of a 1st and 3rd grade boy in Bexley, or boys in Bexley schools. In my professional life, I work in the field of public finance, and which I've done for the past 20 years. And it has afforded me the opportunity to go to over 200 school districts in the state of Ohio and get a perspective that is much broader than Bexley in terms of what is working and what is effective in education and education-related topics. When we chose to move to Bexley more than 5 years ago, for us, our family, it was an easy choice. As I look at school districts all day, every day, and pay attention to the particulars and the data around districts, to us, Bexley jumped out. I am excited to be here. I'm excited about Bexley schools. And part of that excitement came out of the 2019 levy, where I was the treasurer for the Committee for Bexley Excellence, which was the campaign committee that worked to pass the levy. In addition to working on the Committee for Bexley Excellence, I have over 25 cumulative years of board experience, 10 years on public boards. So I have an understanding of how government works and a specialization in school districts. And I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to answer questions and appreciate the library hosting and everyone coming out. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Marguerita, and I want to thank the hosting organizations and the moderators and Mike and everybody else who's here supporting this. I am almost a 20-year Bexley resident. I have a 2020 graduate, a 2016 graduate. I'm the aunt of a 2017 graduate, a 2013 graduate, and a 2011 graduate, I think, if I do that right. If I do that math right. I am in terms of my work or my experiences in Bexley, I am the co-founder and the current president of the Developmental Assets Resource Network, DARN. I've spent all my time, I've coached sports, I've volunteered in the school. So in terms of just the ways that I've lived in the community, those are all parts of the ways that I've lived in the community. Thanks, Brian. And engaged in the community this time. In my current work, I am the director of a collective impact backbone agency who works towards increasing academic, social, emotional, and academic outcomes for kids. What that really means in the non-jargony is across Franklin County, I convene cross-sector agencies. So I convene passionate and committed people who work towards improving the social, emotional, and academic outcomes for kids. So I think the reason that I'm running is, in addition to that, I have a PhD in multicultural and equity studies and education. So I think at this unique time and space as we are as a district, I think I have some unique skills that I can bring to support the district in maintaining its excellent and making sure that it's excellent for all students. Thank you.
Hello, friends. I'm Larry Deatly Ellison, and my pronouns are he, him. My husband, Brian, and I moved to Bexley a short time after we adopted our son, Dante, who is Black, to give him everything that Bexley had to offer. Dante is now an 8th grader, and he has benefited from our great sports and our community, but he still struggles with his learning. I know what it's like to stand by his side to combat racism and to the frustration that we have in navigating through our special education services. Because of him, I want to come to the school board to support families that have had experiences similar to ours. Beyond that, I have nearly 20 years of project management experience in both business and in technology. I know the importance of technology, communication, collaboration, fiscal responsibility, and delivering results. I want to bring all of that experience to the Bexley School Board so that we can make the best future for all of our students. And above all, I want to make sure that our education system works for all students, whether that is our students in special ed and our gifted programs in AP and honors classes or the general population. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jonathan Baker. I've been in Bexley for about 16 years. I have a wife and 3 daughters. 8th grade, 11th grade, and if there's a thing called 14th grade, she's in 14th grade. I've been an educator for 25 years. I was at Columbus State Community College for about 17 years as department chair and mathematics teacher. I've used some of the same technologies that our teachers use currently. I've used the smartboard. I've used the overhead transparency. And I use the stylus with my iPad. So I can identify with the teachers on their issues with the pandemic on whether the camera should be on or off. I've also been a part of the union with Columbus State Community College. I know what it's like to be on both sides of the table. I want to bring that to this conversation. When I chose to run for school board, someone says, Jonathan, go for it. You've been already doing the work. I was president of the Bexley Minority Parent Alliance, where we worked shoulder to shoulder with the district on a variety of issues on getting representation in the district, and you're seeing those changes. I want to bring that passion and that commitment to the board. Thank you.
All right. Can you hear me? All right, I've been doing this now for 5 minutes. So please bear with me. First question. The district strategic plan is up for a review, and that gives an opportunity to look at the assessment of successes and the remaining challenges. What is your experience in doing such a review, given your qualifications and your work in community service? Do I just pick one? And we'll start with Joanne.
So I've spent my entire career building coalitions to pass important federal legislation or state legislation. Anytime you do that, you need a plan. Sorry. You need a plan. You need to figure out where you're going and how you're going to get things done. Sorry about that. I'm not close enough, I guess. First, you need to figure out what the problem is. Anytime you make a strategic plan, and we have one now, is what's the problem? What's the data behind it? But how are you going to make measurable goals to your progress? In our strategic plan, we have made goals. So I'm happy that we're going to be revisiting it. Another thing when you're making a strategic plan is you have to think about how you're including the community in that process and how you are seeking input from stakeholders and experts. That's something I do every day. More important with the strategic plan, it can't just sit on the shelf. You have to continue to move to your goals, but you also have to make sure that you're funding that plan. A strategic plan is just a document if you don't have the resources to fund it. And that's where my experience managing budgets come in. I've managed for campaigns or issue advocacy campaigns, multi-million-dollar budgets. And you have to look, what is your goal? What are your values? What do you want to be funding? And then how you're constantly moving your savings around to get to your end goal. So I'm excited we're revisiting our strategic plan. We have made progress on it, but we also need to determine, based on what the community says and teachers and students, on how we improve upon it. But I've done that. You really can't get anything done unless you have a plan. But more importantly, it can't just sit on the shelf. You have to go back and refine it on what's going on in the community. Thank you.
So I mentioned in my opening that I have more than 10 years experience working on public boards, and 8 of those years I've been on the board of the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio, which is probably the least exciting entity until it becomes very exciting, right? Until there's a problem. And it is a $45 million budget and affects every single person that lives in Franklin County. And one of the things that I have learned in my 8 years on the board is that a strategic plan is critically important to an organization. If you look at some of the work that has been done in that organization, you can see a very strong strategic plan. Every single decision that is made ties back to the strategic plan. I am a huge believer in the value of a plan. I believe that your mission and vision should be established within the plan. The spend of the organization should be linked to the mission and vision. Medium-term goal or long-term goals, medium-term goals, short-term goals. This is all work that I have done. It is all work that I believe in. I believe that the current strategic plan that the district has, which is now more than 3 years old, is the world has changed significantly over the past 3 years. It is time to update that. I am excited to take on that process and have the experience to make it a successful one.
So in my current work, I convene over 35 youth serving agencies across Franklin County. And part of my job is to support them in developing their continuous improvement plans around how they're going to increase the academic, social, emotional outcomes for young people. So engaging and coaching groups through their strategic plans is part of my daily work, right? Is convening groups. In addition to that, I've been invited to serve on the strategic planning committee for Columbus City Schools. As a DEI and education consultant, I'm hired to do that for other districts to help them engage in an equity audit and use that data to inform their strategic planning outcomes. So I think from a continuous improvement standpoint and also from a strategic planning standpoint, looking at Bexley's strategic plan has to engage not just the community, but also the teachers and the students, right? In what ways are teachers and students and a broad swath of the community being engaged in the process in order to form it? not through a survey, but through an actualization of the plan, right? So how are we taking into account the voices of all community members? How are we seeking out community members who don't normally come to the table, right? And often don't feel like they have a place at the table, and making sure that their perspectives influence and form the plan we create. But in addition to that, how do we make sure that the young people we serve, their perspectives and their lived experiences are influential in the plan that we're creating? In addition to looking at families, but also looking at our community members who don't have kids in the school. So how are we thoughtful in engaging a robust set of partners in the creation of our strategic plan?
So first off, I'd like to say that as part of the Bexley DEI group, I have had the experience in the past year to work on revising or updating the strategic plan for the city of Bexley to include and make sure that it focuses on things that relate to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that was a great learning experience to have that, that experience here in the city of Bexley. Additionally, for my job, I work for Optum Technology and I support our chief information officer, and we have to have a strategic technology plan every single year that supports our business partners. And so I know what it's like to have to put those strategic plans together, work with our stakeholders to make sure that that strategic plan is supporting their needs, and how to build metrics in order to measure the progress towards that strategic plan. So I have the business and technology experience behind that, and I have city experience behind working with the DEI to work on the strategic plan. I think that we also need to make sure that it is representative, that the community has a voice. I know one of the things that I've heard from a number of people when I talk to them in the community is that communication is important. So that's doubly important here with the strategic plan, as well as getting their input. We have a lot of parents that are busy and work and aren't able to participate regularly. So we need to know how to figure out how to engage them. Thank you.
Every organization comes back to its vision, mission, values. And those things are the bedrock for the strategic plan. When I was with the Bexley City Schools, I worked with the tech plan that Brad Pettit put together that was very instrumental in helping us get through the pandemic, as it turns out. Now, at Columbus State Community College, I was department chair, and we actually had a retreat on learning how to do strategic plans for our departments, whether that was instruction or curriculum. And what that does, it provides a roadmap. It provides a common ground for which us to come back to in case we veer off. So it's no longer a personal attack of, hey, you're doing this wrong, I'm doing this right. What does our plan say? It provides a way to have a compass of sorts. And so I think the key thing is, you may have seen around Bexley, the number 4 a lot, okay, with some of my signs. But the point of that is that it's not about the number 4 as far as the metaphor for the word 4, but it's about 4 pieces to us all working together. Students, what are the needs for the students? What are the needs for the parents and families? What are the needs for the community? And what are the needs for the educator? We need all 4 of them at the table to be part of a great strategic plan. Thank you.
This is our strategic plan. You can find it on the internet. It's an easy Google. As a executive professor at Capital University, I've been teaching at Capital since I want to say 1980, and I've had the pleasure of working on several strategic plans at the university. And as was said earlier, you need to align the mission and the vision. You also have to measure it. You also have to pay for it. I have worked in public finance for a number of years. At one point, I was part of a team that led the state in underwriting school bond issues. One of the items on here that concerns me is the long-term facility planning, which includes components of innovative spaces, safety, and so on. I will tell you that the Maryland cafeteria, for example, is the same cafeteria my oldest daughter used a little over 30 years ago. And Margot, I'm sorry, I gave everyone a hint of your age. How we pay for this, how it aligns with what the citizenry of Bexley wants is very important. And one of the things I hope to do is listen to you, just as my late wife did years ago, to hear what you want, to hear what is important to you, and to share with you how we think we're going to pay for it, because that's equally important. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. The next question appropriately focuses on student voice and integrating students in decision-making. So the question is, what are the concrete steps you're planning to take in order to work more effectively with student organizations and ensure that their voices and opinions are reflected in the decisions of the board? So I'll try it again. What are the concrete steps you're planning to take in order to work more effectively with student organizations and ensure that student voices and opinions are reflected in the decisions made by the board? And I think that we will start with Larry. Yes. His name's Larry, right? Patrick, sorry. I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Patrick King.
I
This
apologize.
is a tough question that has come up in some of the conversations I've had around the community. And I think in a lot of the instances where input is sought, whether it's from teachers or students, community stakeholders, the city, all of the different folks in Bexley, I think this all ties back to having strong policies, having best practices, searching the country, going through the policy world to try to find those positions and those opportunities to engage students. Certainly, if you go to a board meeting, you can see there's a student representative on the board that participates in board meetings. But I think that what is really needed is greater depth and greater involvement. And I think that comes with infrastructure around committees, the student council groups, and really having a roll up to the board in a formalized way that is documented in policy. So that is, I'm a firm believer in policy. I believe that that's really the fundamental role of the board. And in order to answer this question and give the students a voice, I would examine the policies of the district. So thank you.
Thank you. I think one of the things I talked about, even in this space, was that we've had some great panels. We've had the DI panel, we have the BMPA, we're gonna have the League of Women Voters in the South Bexley. If it were up to me, there would be a panel run by students. Like, we're selecting a school board that the people who are gonna be most influenced by that school board are the young people in the schools, right? So they should have a panel, and it could be run by BARP, a combination of BARP, the Social Justice Club, the student government, that group to get together. And they ask questions of the things that are important to them. So how do we create spaces and opportunities where the young people's voices are not just one person sitting at a meeting, but the collective of the community, the collective of the school community influencing policy and influencing practice, right? So what ways do we create what's called sort of a community feedback loop, right? A loop where that is getting information from the students, using that where students are not asked their opinion after a policy has been created, but who are actually instrumental in the creation of the policy, instrumental in the ideas of what's going on in their curriculum, right? And so I think from a structural standpoint, what does that look like? How do you engage current school clubs that are already in place, BMPA, BARP, I think the Social Justice Club, the Student Council, but also the Pride group and and the athletic group and all the ways that the students in our community live in those spaces. And how are they informing it? One of the things I'd like to do is create a structure where board members are available to have conversations with students on different days. So there's a time and a structure where students can come down to the community room and share their ideas with the board members about what's important to them. Thank you.
So I actually think for me, this is an easy question because I reflect back to the listening that I do with our students here in the community. So the first example that I would like to give you is that back last year in 2020, just past the height of the pandemic, and our school board meetings were online, we had the fortune to have a student from the middle school give public comments at one of our board meetings. And they came as they identify as gender diverse. And they came to the meeting to explain not that they are having issues with bullying every day, which is a good thing to hear. They came to say that they wanted the school board to know that they didn't see themselves represented in the school curriculum and teachers and their daily lives. And so it's important to listen to kids like that. We have our Bexley Anti-Racism Project group that gave a fantastic presentation, teach-in on the school front lawn at the end of August to tell the community about House Bills 322 and 327 and how they feel that learning history is important to them and that they want fair and honest history taught to them. I was able to help connect them with our representative from the House, the State House, Kristen Boggs, and they had a meeting a week or two after that, and they had a great discussion with her, and they're engaged with that process yet today with the State House.
In my roles at Columbus State Community College and at Ohio State, I've had the honor of being an advisor to different community groups, different groups of the university. And one thing I've learned is that you need to go where the students are. So in a formal sense, yes, you need to go ahead and go have meetings on site if at all possible. Don't make it hard for them to come to you. You go to them. You get a little sticker and become a visitor. You go to them and meet during the school if you can handle that, if you can make that work. You also go where they are informally. You attend the basketball games like I've been doing. You attend the volleyball matches. You have those conversations on the side the same way that we had those conversations at the football games with different parents about how things are going. Another thing that I've done, kids like pizza. And so if there's a way to kind of reel them in with a little pizza, with a way to kind of provide an incentive, it can go a long way. Practically speaking, with the Bexley Minority Parent Alliance, we had an opportunity to meet with some of these students black men actually, young black men, and we had pizza and we had a great conversation. A lot of great conversations can come around pizza. Give it a shot.
I am blessed that on one side of me is a family with 3 kids in the school district right now. On the other side of me is a family with 5 kids in the school district right now, and around the corner, there's a bunch more. We have a student rep on the school board, which is fabulous. I have been going to field hockey practices. I've been going to football practices. I look forward to attending Amy Blosser's fall concerts and spring concerts and going to theater productions. All those things to get out and get into the community, chat with parents. More importantly, though, I think chat with kids and see how they feel is important to me. I look forward to getting the Torch newspaper. As a school board member, we get those, I believe, as they come out. Julie Horger does a great job with that. That gives you a sense, a little temperature check on what's going on at the school. But, I will support initiatives that show that students are being heard. but I also want to go out and actively solicit opinions. I don't plan to go in there and micromanage things and, oh yeah, we're going to fix it for you. But I look forward to hearing, what the concerns are of the parents. And I look forward to hearing what the concerns are of the students. How bad is the cafeteria food? Is the open lunch period too short? What can we do to make this? High school's tough. Let's face it, high school is really hard. What can we do to help make it just a touch easier? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that, we need to make sure that students are involved in our decision-making process. We want them to feel invested in the process so they know we're invested in them. I think, I'm a mom of 2 7-year-olds. They don't tell me anything at school. I don't pretend to know what is going on at middle school and high school. But I do understand now, after my work on the English and Language Arts equity audit last year, how important it is to solicit student advice. I will tell you, some of the most powerful comments during that, and I went back and read them this week just to refresh my memory. Those students had wonderful comments on how they wanted to be more connected to the curriculum. And that goes to one of my values. I want students to feel valued, seen, heard, and validated, and connected to what's going on in the classroom, their peers and their teachers. But I think one of the most important things is, yes, we can listen. I think one of the things we should do when we find out a problem, we should do a survey to students who are impacted by that. We should go and listen to them, obviously, however it's appropriate as board members during the school day. But also, we can't just listen to them. We actually have to create the change that they want us to create. So out of that English and Language Arts project, there were actual recommendations that the students, the teachers, and the parent working group made. The district is starting to implement some new instructional materials into that curriculum so that students feel connected. We need to make sure we're funding that change. Some of the things that the teacher said was, yes, of course we want our students connected to our materials, but we need to be able to get those materials and we need the time to actually implement it. So I think it's important to listen. We actually have to act upon what they say and find the resources in the budget to support their ideas. And then, oh, by the way, we can't just think we did it and the problem solved. We need to go back again to the same group of students or to other students and say, this is what we did. Was it helpful? Was it not helpful? How can we improve? That also goes back to the strategic plan. Students need to be involved in that too. I'm sorry, I wasn't involved my kids weren't in school last time we did the strategic plan. But I do think they need to be involved this time as well. Maybe as they were last time, I'm not sure. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, candidates. We received numerous questions that were very similar to this next one. Students working together as the Bexley Anti-Racism Project, as well as other community members, have advocated for changes that would allow the district to better reflect and embrace the diversity of our students and the multicultural society in which we live. Why is diversity important to you? And in your role as a school board member, what policies would you implement to help the district achieve that goal? That was long. I'll do it again. Why is diversity important to you? And in your role as a school board member, what policies would you implement to help the district achieve a goal to embrace diversity and inclusion? And we're going to start with Marguerite.
So my entire professional career is based on equity, diversity, and inclusion, in particular around creating educational equity for kids. That's the work I've done. I started my teaching career in Oakland, sorry. And so I think it's at the root of my identity as an educator and as a professional. So I think the way that happens is first creating spaces where all kids see themselves reflected in the curriculum and reflected in the approaches, right? And so what that looks like is we value all funds of knowledge, all the ways that kids engage in school and engage in their lived experiences, right? Like you have to look at the ways, do kids see themselves not just reflected in the curriculum, but do they see themselves reflected in how teachers are teaching? and in the ways that teachers are collaborating with each other, and the ways that they are creating spaces for kids to collaborate with each other and learn from each other and their unique lived experiences, right? And so I think one of the ways that we do that is to provide professional development to our educators. The biggest impact on student outcomes are the teachers. And so in the absence of creating an environment where teachers understand how to implement curriculum that is culturally responsive through the lens of cultural humility, right? That seeks to look at an asset-based approach to all the students who bring. You can't do that without creating an education system where teachers know how to and have the opportunities to make that happen. Thank you.
Diversity is very important to me because it expands my knowledge. It helps me step into my truth. When you're able to be your authentic self, it encourages me to be my authentic self. And I can learn from you, you can learn from me. And that's the importance of diversity in our school system amongst our students. It's also very important to make sure that we have representation. So representation is important because it makes students feel more comfortable, and it helps to validate some of the ways that they see the world when they can see that reflected back to them and our teaching staff. So I would ensure that our policies were focused on diversity, but also making sure that we have a diverse teaching staff. What can we do to make sure that my Black son experiences a Black teacher in his educational time here at Bexley? I think that our Board of Education should also be diverse. It's very important to make sure that diverse perspectives are brought to the board, because the Board of Education is representing our most valuable asset, our students. And so I feel like my diversity is a lens through which I can bring that validation for those students to the board.
Diversity for me is not enough. I want to focus on a sense of belonging, a sense of inclusion. If I have those two components, I know we'll have the diversity there too. Personally, growing up and going to Northwestern for undergraduate, I know it's like to be the only minority in the classroom and to not feel like you belong there. I know it's like to feel the imposter syndrome, to be called names, to be told I was acting white. I don't want my students in Bexley to feel that way. And I feel like with diversity, there needs to be a sense of allyship. We need persons from the larger group to provide allyship to those who might feel like they're at the margins, whether that's by ability, whether that's by gender, whether that's by race and ethnicity. Actually, academically, in mathematics, my training, my background, we welcome diverse perspectives on how to solve a problem. Algebraically, graphically, and with or without the calculator. And I think the same kind of thing provides a way for students to see themselves like that my answer is also right. My way of viewing things is also right. I think we can't be narrow-minded in our approach to taking care of each other, and we can't be narrow-minded in our ways of learning academically. Diversity can build us together, and I think we should continue to do those things, academically and personally. Thank you.
My 3 children went through Bexley City Schools without ever having or engaging with any diversity in the faculty. If you look at the administration right now, I think we've done a very good job, or the previous boards have done a good job of diversifying the administrative side. One of the things that I talk about on my website is recruiting diverse faculty. And when I say recruiting, I mean it. Go out and find them. Make sure we're in touch with those schools that produce teachers, good teachers, and let's go get what we want. If you look for it, you'll find it. Before you look at me and say, well, here's some old white guy, what does he know about diversity? My mother's from Guatemala. I'm Hispanic. My mom was, a high school teacher, Spanish. I grew up not knowing how to play baseball and got ridiculed for it. But I did wind up, going to school, going to college and getting to play soccer. So I guess it worked out. I think the student experience is enhanced when they do encounter a diverse faculty, when they do encounter diversity on the other side of the desk and get to experience that and perhaps even aspire to it. So one of the things that I really want to do, one of my focal points will be to recruit a diverse faculty at all grade levels in our school system. Thank you.
So one of the things I have looked at and reviewed is some data last year from both our OES study and our panorama study. It was really heartbreaking to see that some students in high school, middle school didn't feel like they belong here. So that's part one. But now we need to come with concrete examples in the short term and the long term on how we can solve that. So obviously it goes to the connected part, continuing the equity audits of our curriculum. Our curriculum is reviewed every 3 years, but making sure we're doing that as well and making those changes that we need to. And we talked a lot about increasing diversity of staff, and the district has done that. But how actually are we going to do that? Yes, look at our recruitment practices. We could also have a mentorship program between current teachers going out to other university and colleges to try to recruit teachers. Let them know how great it is to work here in Bexley. We could also be connecting with some of the historical Black colleges in the state and in the surrounding communities. But that's also on the administration. That's the day-to-day recruitment efforts. The board needs to support policies to do that. We also need to make sure that we're continuing to have diverse materials, and not only in high school and middle school, but in libraries in our elementary school. And I know our librarians are working really hard on that. We also need, I talked to someone, an administrator today, this has to be a community effort. So what are we also doing as a district to provide parents with this support so that we can also be teaching our students and our kids at home the same things they're learning in the classroom on diversity, equity, and inclusion? Again, you want kids to feel safe, seen, heard, and validated. Those are things we can do in the short term. And I thank the administrator I talked to today about this. We also, as a community, need to look over the long term of how we got here. Why don't kids really feel like they belong? That's a long-term discussion. And that is things that we have to come together, not as a district, but as a community. Thank you.
Okay.
So diversity is important to me as a community member and a potential school board member, because I understand that a lot of the learning that it takes place in school is not directly in textbooks, but it's the reactions and the interactions between students and teachers, administrators, and the community. And that diversity of opinions, of viewpoints, of experiences makes for a richer, fuller learning experience. In terms of what policies I would put together and champion and attempt to implement as a school board member, I think we talked about recruiting a diverse teacher population. That's a very challenging thing to do. And it's certainly something that a lot of other school districts are trying to do, but that's something that Bexley should work very hard on. Implement specific programs to recruit teachers, things like loan forgiveness, putting teachers, incentives to have teachers live in the district. In terms of administrators, the district has done a good job getting administrators. Of the 19 administrators in the district, 4 are of diverse backgrounds, whether it be LGBTQ or folks of color. So there is always work to be done. This is a continuous improvement piece and something that I think that needs to be reflected in the planning and policies of the district.
Okay, I just want to remind everyone to please honor our time limits. We don't want to have to get in there and use that old shepherd's hook. Okay, the next question has to do with resources. More resources for the district will be needed in the future. One of the questions, another question focused on the need to improve our facilities. Do you support a property tax increase or an income tax increase or a combination of the two? So that the premises where there is need for more resources. Another question focused on the need for improved facilities. And then the actual question is, do you support a property tax increase or an income tax increase or a combination of the two?
So it will be without a doubt that at some point Bexley will come to the community for another levy.
Okay, you got resources.
I would need to, as a board member, I would definitely support a levy as long as I
Sure.
had the supporting information from our administration to know why we need the levy. Bexley has done a very good job of managing money. And I think that this community saw that when we had our levy in 2019, that was the first levy that the community had seen in, I think, about 9 years.
How do we not?
If I remember correctly. While that's unusual for most school districts, we will probably likely see, as Dr. Miller and Kyle Smith explained to the community when they were presenting the levy request initially, that we may fall back into a cycle of having more regular levies, which is more consistent with other school board or school systems. So I would be supportive of it, but I need to understand and make sure that I understand why we need the levy and that we have the community support for that.
The basic question is, do you support a property tax increase or an income tax increase or a combination of the two? But the premise was more resources are needed. Like, we had a few questions about, we need to improve our facilities, we're going to have to spend more money, and how the question is based on that.
So I play tennis, and I've seen the renovation to the tennis courts in particular more recently. I think as far as the role of the board is in terms of providing the policies, and I think the treasurer definitely can help us out in terms of what to do on this particular case. I see an opportunity here for a little bit of both as far as the property taxes, given the fact that we have a boom in our housing market right now. There could be some benefit there. And of course, in terms of the income taxes as well. But I think I would work with the treasurer on the exact combination of the two with a slight leaning towards property taxes. Thank you.
Let me share a couple of facts with you, which you may or may not be aware of. Just over 60% of the citizenry of Bexley do not have a kid or children in the school district right now. So think about that. One of the things about having a great faculty is you get to pay them. We run about a $40 million budget a year. And just about, I'm going to say with benefits, about 80% of that goes to pay the faculty. So doesn't leave a lot left over to, in my example, renovate the Maryland cafeteria. It's a challenge. But we're here. And when I moved out of Bexley in 2012, I got to experience the joy of not having to file Bexley income tax or Bexley property tax. But I came back, not because I enjoy paying more taxes, but because I like living in Bexley. You can go and look up the school history of levies, what has passed, what has failed. We have a great track record of passing levies. I think we as a district have to do a better job communicating to you, the citizens, why we need the money and where it's going. Great example, the field. Thank God we put that field in up at the high school. Anyway, I'm up and I don't want to run afoul of Ms. Beckerle here. So thank you.
So I think I'm going to kind of answer two of these questions. So yes, we will have to go for another operating levy. I participated in the last levy campaign. It was my role as the outreach director to go talk to voters about why we needed it, what the money would do, and to ask voters support. I know how hard that is. I know how important it is to include the community members on the beginning. A levy really starts with a couple of things. The treasurer and the superintendent of the board and the financial advisory committee, which consists of community members with a background in finances and previous levies. We're continuously looking at the 5-year forecast of our district and the projections in growth, revenue, and expenditures. Our student growth has skyrocketed over the last 10 years. It's been pretty consistent. So when we go to the levy, which will probably be in another year or so, the financial advisory committee and the treasurer will come together and think about what's the size of the possible levy we need to ask voters for, and options the best way to do it. For me personally, the income tax is too variable to be a stable source of revenue. So I would probably support more of a property tax. And I'll tell you, I've lived in this district for 15 years. I did not have kids for 8 years for various reasons. That's just how life happens. I have paid taxes without having kids in the schools. I know how hard it is. And I also know how hard it is to go ask for people. On the facilities, that's also related to our growth as well. That's a long-term, and that's a whole different set of campaigns. That's a bond issue. We need to have a long-term study of our student growth and our possible student growth. We need to ask students and teachers in the community what they want their facilities to look like, not now, but 30, 40 years from now. But also, I know how hard it is. About 70% of our revenue, over that, comes from local property taxes and income taxes. Again, I would rely on the expertise of that financial advisory committee. But as the board, we need to think about what we can ask residents for, how long that money will last before we have to ask again. I'm going to tell you that 8-year break of between the last two levies, that's going to be rare. So again, I would most likely support more of the property tax avenue. Thank you.
The current funding structure that Bexley Schools has of 70% of the district's revenue coming from property tax, 20% from income tax, and 10% from state aid, in round numbers, is somewhat unique in certainly central Ohio, in that most school districts do not have a school district income tax. School district in Bexley does, largely because of the minimal commercial base. So as a member of the Financial Advisory Council that Joanne mentioned, these conversations have already started. These concepts have been introduced to look at the most equitable way to fund our schools in terms of a mix between property tax and income tax. In 2019, there were several proposals that were put forward that everything from all income tax to all property tax. The Financial Advisory Council came up with the proposals, made a recommendation to the board, and the board ultimately voted on the 9 mil operating levy that was passed 68% to 32%. The process this time around, I would imagine, would be very similar in that the community input would be taken. There would be an extremely long lead up. The Financial Advisory Council would make a determination, take that to the board for recommendation. This is not a Patrick King question or any single board member question. It's a community conversation, and it's one of the most important decisions that this district will make over the next 4 years.
So I'm going to start out with, this is not where my expertise lies. So I think for me, it would really be about, much to Patrick's point, is leaning into the experts who are brought into this conversation and figuring out what the choices are and how that impacts different community members. I think for me, when I think about the levy and all, we each had an interview with the BEA, and one of the questions, the educators union, and one of the questions they had was the discomfort they felt last time that they were asked to go ask for the levy, when they didn't have talking points that were alignment with what were the priorities of the district, right? And I think the question they asked was, how would they go forward and ask for what talking points would they need in order to go forward to get the community to vote for the levy? And I think one of the questions is in what way are the money that we asking, why are we asking for money? And being incredibly transparent about how that money is going to be used. And I think based on sort of previous experiences, there's some disconnect and some distrust in the community about how that has happened in the past and how that might happen in the future. So in terms of the logistics of the property tax versus the income tax, I think I would have to definitely do some more research. But in terms of how we are communicating that and how we are transparent about it and how we're going to use it and the ways that we're going to disrupt past practices, I think that is probably a bigger issue for how we move forward as a board, whoever's elected, in terms of how that is operationalized and played out.
All right. Next question. How will you help to promote transparency for school board matters, ensure good communication, and hear from diverse perspectives from community stakeholders? How will you help to promote transparency for school board matters, ensure good communication, and hear diverse perspectives from community stakeholders?
There are four pieces to my campaign. One of them is, of course, in terms of having clear communication between parents in the district. And I think one thing is very clear, that social media can be one vehicle. It can get out of hand sometimes, right? But I think that could be a way for it to communicate with our people. One thing I've also done during the campaign is work with having meetings in person with different constituents as well. Transparency. I know there's a dynamic with the board in terms of coming to the board meetings and only be able to kind of read or say your points and not be able to have a conversation. I think the board needs to go to the people. I am willing, if elected, to continue to have a monthly meeting with stakeholders, diverse perspectives. We have a myriad of different organizations and different leaders around here as well. Reaching out to them, attending their meetings, and being a voice and a champion for them as well. Transparency. I believe using our website to broadcast our minutes and our conversations within reason, of course, but using technology and websites, and of course, communicating via social media. I think those are key. What transparency does is it builds trust. And right now, the district needs increased trust between the board and the community. Thank you.
I am not on Facebook. I am not on the Bexley Buzz. I am at 330 South Roosevelt. So you want to stop by, please do so. But I ask that you do it within reason. I recently had a number of enthusiastic members, I think, of the women's soccer team by accident share their toilet papering skills with me. I think they were confused. Maybe not, I don't know. I look forward to being part of the community. We have an app. You know, Bexley City Schools has an app, but I don't think you're using it unless you got kids in the district. Unfortunately, you know, we used to get, a number of you used to subscribe to the Columbus Dispatch, and with that, you would get that, you know, This Week in Bexley. A lot of you don't do that anymore. Maybe you get it like me, you know, the e-edition, then you got to go hunting for it. So I would like to see the district not so much make available, but make the citizenry aware of where the communication is, whether it's This Week in Bexley and how you can find it. Bexley Living, I think, is begging for some sort of commentary from the superintendent and or from the treasurer. So I would hope to start using that a little bit more. But as far as transparency, I think the biggest thing is be out in the community, be a part of the community. Be there to be heard, to be listened to. Thank you.
So I hear this a lot when I'm talking to residents at the doors, or I'm having a coffee with somebody. Everybody wants more communication, but this is the question. First, it's to who and how do we deliver that communication? So for parents, I love my Sunday night email from Mrs. Drake. I love it. I'm getting that, but residents of the community who don't have children are not getting that. So how can we continue to have personalized communications between our schools and our students? I'll have to tell you, as a parent and after going on this journey, I spent a lot of time on the district website. It can be very challenging to find things on there. So I think really working with the district to figure out how we can make the website more of a one-stop shop. We all get our information through various ways. We'll get a post and say, go visit the website. Sometimes you can't find what they're talking about in the post. So when you talk about communication to residents without students in the school, that was me a couple of years ago. I had no idea what was going on in the schools unless I went to my friends' kids' sporting events or plays, or I walked to school with them one day. So how can we work to increase communications? We don't have really this week of the dispatch. How can we work with community groups to partner with them when they're having events to get the word out? Again, we can do coffees. How can we think of ways outside the box? I mean, can we send more mail out? I think we get 2 pieces of mail from the district, a newsletter. So on the transparency issue, you really get that by increasing communication on the front end of things and on the back end of things. And then the diversity question, I do have an example. Anytime I start a project, whether it's,
Can you pay attention to the time?
Sure. But anytime I start a project, I always ask myself, when we sit down the first organizing meeting, who's missing from this table? You have great ideas already, but we always continuously need to ask ourselves who's missing from the table, and then how do we go back and continue to add more voices as we go along the process?
So there is definitely a sense among the people that I talk to in this community that when the board shows up on a Monday night, the first Monday of every month, that a lot of the decisions that are made have already been made, that the process has been in motion, and the business meeting that is occurring is already been cooked, right? So in traveling the state and looking at other districts and attending other board meetings for other school districts, a technique and a idea that I have shared is the idea of a work session, whether it's on hot topics, which there are a few these days, if we're all aware of, have a work session where there's a open dialogue and the ability for the board to communicate. Oftentimes, school districts will have their business meeting the one Monday of a month, 2 weeks later, come back and have a work session to have some of this dialogue. Secondly, there are other avenues in terms of financial reporting and different pieces out there that can get the message out in a different way. I think it's important to know that communication is the umbrella and the overall concept. And within that, there's informing people and there's engaging people. And in terms of really engaging our population, that's what we want. We don't want to just throw the message out there, but to reach out and have folks be engaged in the message that's being shared.
Okay.
So.
I'm in agreement with both Patrick and Jonathan about having off month or bi-week, once a month meetings that coincide with the board meetings. I think having an open work group session, having an open session where there's a facilitated dialogue, not an open free-for-all, right? But a facilitated dialogue where there's back and forth, where there's an exchange of information, an exchange of ideas, where there's a dialogue. And I think that's something that we could structure. My understanding is if we publicize it ahead of time, it's something that can happen. And it can happen in a space like the library, right? A space that's open to the community and available for conversation. I think in terms of transparency, it's about being honest, clear, transparent, and research-based, right? So if we just, part of the process in terms of communication and transparency is being really clear about what is the decision is, what's the decision that is being made. What is the process? What is the decision-making process? How is that going to be decided, right? What research is going to be used to inform that decision, right? And then how that decision is going to be implemented. So I think previously that clarity in terms of what we're doing, why we're doing it, how it's going to be put in place, and then gathering ongoing follow-up information as to the impact, not just in that moment of time, but what are the outcomes that we're seeing from that decision? How are those outcomes being measured? And what are we doing to modify or respond as things evolve, right? So thinking about the decisions that we're making in terms of clear communication and ongoing continuous improvement.
This will sound familiar, but I will also commit as a board member that I would have a monthly meeting, open meeting for community members to come talk to me. I think that just makes sense. In my day job, I focus on employee engagement. And one of the ways that we do that is through communications. And I, like many other folks on the panel tonight, have listened to the community and heard some of the struggles that our parents have in communication. And I think that it's really important to make sure that we are finding ways, most likely through technology, to help communicate to our parents better. I have had parents tell me that they are maybe a single parent or both parents work a lot. They're busy taking care of kids, cooking dinner, and they have a hard time keeping up on the communication that is coming out. So I know that, like Joanne mentioned, for Mrs. Drake, our son's in middle school, so we get a great email from Jason Cottle every week. And I don't know, it's probably about this long sometimes, and I have a hard time keeping up through all of it. There's a lot of information in there. I think we can solve some of that through technology, but we also need to make sure that we're engaging those parents that don't have access to technology or have limited access to things like social media.
Okay, well, we have many, many wonderful questions. Sadly, we won't be able to get through all of them. So I think this will be our last question. And we're back to where we started. What value or set of unique skills would you bring to the board? What value or set of unique skills would you bring to the board? What value?
What's your value?
Right.
In 2012, I was part of a mission trip from Bexley United Methodist Church back to the place where I spent my formative years, Guatemala, to build a school. As we were leaving, as we were flying back, I asked the students, many of them high school students from Bexley, what was the big takeaway? What did they realize? And one of the things universally was education is such a game changer. And so that is one thing. As a professor, as part of an extended family that's been teachers, between my mother my late wife, her big sister. Education has always been part of our DNA. I am also an industry arbitrator for the Financial Industry National Regulatory Association. Basically, we settle disputes if you're upset with your broker or financial advisor. From that, and having done that for decades now, I've learned how to negotiate, how to listen to different sides, and how to come up with either a response that makes everybody happy or equally pisses everybody off. I don't know. But I've been doing it for quite a while. So those are the two things. I value education. I get it. It's a game changer. And I am used to listening to desperate parties and trying to hammer out a compromise. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned my career, I spent my entire career being an advocate, whether it's for a cause or a piece of legislation or a candidate I really believed in. And the first process I always do, the first thing I do is bring people together, identify what's the problem and how we're going to solve it, and then continuously add people to that table. I'm not always going to think that I have the best idea. We need to share ideas and come to a consensus on a way to move forward. Then most importantly, I know what it's like to build a plan on how you measure your success, how you get to your end goal. If you can't measure it, you can't track your progress. And then after going back and revisiting your end goal to make sure you achieved it and how you're going to educate the community on what it means to them. I also have experience in really making sure that a budget reflects your end goal of that campaign. We need to be, as I mentioned before, we can solicit as much advice as possible. If we don't build consensus and pass it and actually fund that change, it just sits there. I think we're going to face some challenges as a district. And we're going to go back and have to ask voters for another levy. I've done that. I know how hard it is. I was one of those people knocking on your doors, telling you what it meant and asking for your votes and answering your questions. Those weren't easy conversations at the door. So I think for me, I always take a unique global perspective on what the problem is, what's the data behind it, and how we're going to come together and solve it as a community. I'm not just here on one issue. I know that we have challenges to address, and we need to come to a community to figure out how we address them in the short term and long term, and also how that reflects back to our strategic plan and how we build on our successes.
I believe that an effective board is comprised of people with individual and distinct skills that come together and work together to develop solutions and solve problems. And the unique skill that I would bring to the Bexley Board of Education comes from my 20 years of working with Ohio school districts on their finances. Some of the most important decisions that this district will make over the next 4 years will revolve around finances. The concepts of a property tax versus an income tax, which we touched on earlier, is going to be a conversation that we have. Every day, I am communicating with other school districts about their finances, about their levies, about their facilities, what they look like, what they should look like, and how they can be funded. So I have experience in school finance, which is a huge component of what a board should be doing, and a very distinct expertise. Related, I think that, I'm very conscientious of being conscious of being a finance person and talking a lot about finance in these meetings, because I do not want to come across as someone who is going to be combing through the paperclip budget to make sure that we are spending every nickel perfectly. I think the financial background is on the planning side, and the ability to, as I said earlier, link mission to spend and being aligned in how we deploy our resources. So thank you.
So I think the unique skills and value that I bring is I've been an educator for 30 years, right? In particular, I'm an educator who teaches educational coaches and teaches facilitation and education setting, right? So my work is around how do you normalize conversations in the presence of differences, right? Differences of opinion, cultural differences, sociocultural identities. So how do you have conversations in the presence of race, class, gender identities, religious differences? How do you bring people together who share very different lived or have very different lived experiences to get them to identify a common goal and work together, leveraging the strengths of all of those differences, seeing difference as an asset to find a common ground to move the decision process forward or to move the work forward. And so I think one of the unique skills I bring is this idea that you can, Bexley in some ways is an easy space to do it in, right? Because in the end, we all value strong schools. We all want what's best for children. We all want all children to feel a sense of belonging. So when you can bring people, align them to that common goal, you can move beyond some of the differences that might cause conflict and bring people together around a common goal and use that to develop outcomes that work for everybody. Thank you.
So I think our Bexley Board of Education is made stronger when its collective intelligence is made up of diverse people. In fact, a 2020 Harvard Business Review study shows that when you have cognitively diverse outsiders on a board, it makes incumbents more likely to ask questions and feel like they can dissent more honestly. So outside perspectives allow boards to make better decisions and can bring Bexley school system into the future. I am that cognitively diverse outsider in this group that can bring change to the Bexley Board of Education. With my life experiences as a gay man, raising a Black son, and navigating through the special education system, I feel like I can bring those perspectives and more to the Bexley Board of Education.
I am a trained, data-driven decision maker. But in terms of a value, those who know me to be honest and a man of integrity. My wife and I moved to Bexley when we knew this is a very religiously diverse community. And we figured that tolerance compelled us to move to Bexley. Some of my African-American friends in rural communities didn't feel safe, and I didn't want to go there. And having a conversation with a friend of mine, somewhere the notion of tolerance got lost. There was heightened emotion, heightened frustration. We wanted to go our separate ways. But Winston Churchill says, courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. Bexley, I am also a great listener. My friend and I, we sat down, we worked it out. I learned about buzzwords that can be inflammatory in different communities. Bexley, we need a listener right now in our community on the Board of Education. I know we're hurting. I know we're not feeling listened to, but I ask you to sit down, whether it's on masking, whether it's on CRT, whether it's on which one of the 6 of us is going to be on the board. Fight for the unity. Don't let the negativity win out. Thank you.
Great. I know we're at the end of the time, but first of all, I want to thank our moderators from there for doing an excellent job. Appreciate that. Next up from there, I want to thank the committee from there. They've had to deal with me for 2 months from there and me driving them crazy, but I want them to stand up from there. There's also people online from there. Thank you from there. I appreciate it. Bexley Public Library from there. Thanks for hosting my second in-house from there, hybrid model from there. Appreciate it, Ben and staff. And most importantly, I want to thank this group of 6 people here. And thank you for coming out, being a part of this. And more importantly, we got a lot of questions out there. Please continue to ask these 6 people from there those questions. Do coffees, walks from there. I know I bother them sometimes from there too much, but talk with them, ask them questions from there so to make certain that you understand who you're voting for and why. Thank you very much. Have a great day. And also there's some books from the Bexley Historical Society on one of our mayors from there. She's like, yeah, give that. From there, thank you very much.